All right, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about RPGs, one of the most beloved gaming genres, which we see pretty much everywhere. Most modern games, I feel like nowadays, usually have either a bit of an RPG element in them, or just are labeled as an RPG, even though they're really not. I want to kind of get into RPGs in general with this. Starting off with the definition of an RPG, which is a game in which players assume the role of characters in a fictional setting. Now, this is the Wikipedia definition. We're going to get much deeper into RPGs and the whole branch of it. But I want to talk about the different types of RPGs, right? More commonly, we kind of have ARPGs, which are action RPGs. We have CRPGs, which are computer RPGs, and JRPGs, which are Japanese role-playing games. I'm definitely missing a few, as there's so many different types and different sub branches of RPG. And that definition that Wikipedia gave us is such a broad definition, because RPG really does encompass so many different terms and meanings. RPG is so broad, especially nowadays, compared to when it first came out. If you think back to the 80s and 90s, really, role-playing games can be really anything. We had tabletop games in the 80s and 90s, kind of like D&D. And then when we move further, if we go deeper into RPGs, we have CRPGs. Now, this was primarily used to differentiate tabletop RPG from the 80s and the 90s and maybe the early 2000s, from when video games were kind of emerging. And we had our more old school, CRPGs coming out of the works, leaving D&D to be a tabletop RPG, where we have our CRPGs being Baldur's Gate and stuff like that. Obviously, that's more of a modern title, except for if you go back to Baldur's Gate 1, which is, long time ago, and 2 as well. Now, if we get into ARPGs, previously mentioned, this is obviously just it's pretty self-explanatory. The A stands for action, right? Action RPG, that just means an RPG with action elements. But that can be literally anything. You see multiple games kind of fall under this. Skyrim, potentially. The Witcher, which has lots of action focuses into it. Even the new Dragon Age Veilguard, which is pretty action focused. I would say Dragon Age Veilguard's kind of an action RPG in the sense. This also falls into Dark Souls, From Software games, a lot of those. I know Diablo can get classified under ARPG as well, which I could see that, definitely could be a valid. Hey everyone, Post Edit Wet Paint here. I just want to kind of clarify with Diablo and games similar to Diablo also kind of fall into the ARPG region-esque. I want to clarify that I kind of believe that games like Diablo, PoE, Diablo, Last Epoch, Lost Ark, essentially a lot of those games kind of fall under Diablo likes to me and Diablo clones, etc. To me, I kind of feel as if Diablo has created its own type of genre within the RPG space. I can kind of, looter, very loot heavy, dungeon crawl heavy games, boosting the dopamine with just explosions and constant destruction. Diablo games definitely fall under more of their own genre, and I just want to kind of clarify that in the video real quick. So yeah, we also have JRPGs, which I know pretty little about. I just know it's Japanese RPG, which can kind of really mean anything. That's such a broad term. I always see the joke saying that a JRPG, the way if it's a JRPG is if you're using the power of friendship to kind of save the world from a big evil. I'll be honest, I don't have the best definition for JRPGs, but yeah, I got the idea for this video when I was scrolling on Twitter, as I sadly do these days, and I was going through it and I saw this post, and as you can kind of see here, it's got a little bit of a bar that kind of ranges left to right from RPG to action game. And I think the Twitter user here was kind of doing this because of Veilguard, since Veilguard does kind of lean more action heavy. As you see, it goes from Baldur's Gate all the way on the left, and it goes all the way to Devil May Cry 5 on the right, leaning from the more action spectrum to the RPG spectrum. And I really think that this is a great way to put it, there being a spectrum of RPGs and what classifies RPGs, because honestly, in my opinion, I agree. I think that RPGs really are like a spectrum. I think it's super hard to narrow down and define it, because there's so many different things that really do define an RPG. And on this list, you may see some things and wonder, why are we even, questioning whether or not this is an RPG. Some people say The Witcher is a very traditional RPG. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Skyrim got controversy because, instead of being some random dude in Oblivion and Morrowind, you were the Dragonborn, right? You're the Dragonborn, you're this special chosen one person, you know? You're not just some random person that was found in the jail and now has to help the emperor, right? And then Fallout 4, you know, you play the dad. You have a pretty, you know, story kind of laid out for you. So that's why, you know, a lot of these games kind of fall under. People kind of believe that RPGs need to be like medieval fantasy, which is really not the truth. I feel like a really great example is Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is a fantastic CRPG, in my opinion. One of my favorite games. I still have yet to beat it, but it is just so good. So like layered and in depth. And there's just an insane amount of options. So yeah, I think that Cyberpunk being on this list is a little confusing to me. I can kind of see why, but yeah. Other games on this list, Dragon Age Veilguard, which I feel like is pretty action RPG kind of focused. Horizon should not even be on this list. God of War, Devil May Cry, etc. And as you can see, I mean, under each of the action and RPG elements, this creator listed certain things, kind of helping clarify what they think is falls under RPG, and then under action, you know, things like fast-paced combat, traversal, linear story, etc. And then RPG kind of focusing on D&D like. Focus on choices and freedom, which I really believe is super true. Back to what is an RPG in depth, right? That's what our main focus is for this video. What is an RPG? Now, to me, an RPG is where you, the player, are controlling someone else in a fictional setting, kind of similar to the Wikipedia definition, and you get to choose how the narrative is going to go, and the narrative does change based on your decisions. I think that's super important and kind of needed almost. You should have control over the story and how that kind of changes as well. I also think kind of something important for an RPG. I don't think that anybody should be able to do anything. And when I say that, what I mean is I think a thief should be able to steal better than a clunky warrior, you know? And I think a warrior should be able to break down a door better than a nimble thief should. I think things like these are super important when it comes to an RPG, and they kind of help you stay more immersed into the role that you are playing. And to me, that's what's key in an RPG. Being immersed into that role is extremely valuable and extremely important. And being taken out of that immersion at any moment is kind of what kills the RPG defining for me. I think the player should have certain rewards or suffer consequences based on the outcome of their narrative choices. I think that's super important as well. I think things like Baldur's Gate do this very well. Same as Disco Elysium, since they're very typical and traditional to their RPG elements, which I think is great. Super important to me with RPGs is I think you shouldn't be playing a role, you should be fulfilling a role, right? I don't think you should be playing the role of John Skyrim, the Dragonborn. I think you should be fulfilling the role of the thief. I think you should be fulfilling the role of you know, the warrior, similar to what I said, where the thief should steal and be nimble and the warrior should be big and bulky. I think it's super important that you really are immersed into these roles. That's really deep down to me what an RPG is at the very core. These are what should be the main focus of an RPG. If you can't make meaningful decisions, to me, based on the role you're playing, you know, cleric could be healing a certain person in the party, which changes the outcome, or, you know, the thief, like I said, could steal like the ring from the king or anything like that. You know, if you can't make a meaningful decision based on the role that you chose in your RPG, to me that does not count as an RPG. Or at the very least, that is what an RPG should be deep down to the core. Now, when I was doing research for this video to kind of help get some other opinions and thoughts on what RPGs are, really, I came across this Quora post, and like the great Magnus Ludvigsen said, most games are more like acting, right? And it makes perfect total sense when you kind of think about it that way, in the sense where, let's say God of War. You know, this is not an RPG. This is a linear story game that has action elements. It is you playing as Kratos and living out Kratos' story, his journey. You know, that is an action game. That's why when I go back to this spectrum made by the creator and I see God of War all the way to the action right side, it makes the most sense. You know, it shouldn't be, I honestly think it should be even further. I really think it shouldn't even be compared to as an RPG. Yes, it may have inventory and crafting and a bit of stats elements to it, and maybe even some unlocking and such as that. You're not really impacting the story. You're just watching a movie, you are playing as the actor, which is Kratos. And I think that is a perfect way to put it. Mr. Magnus Ludvigsen. I definitely butchered that name. And it makes total sense because, you can't really role play as Kratos, right? When you're playing the God of War games. Yes, you can pretend to be Kratos, but you can't do anything different other than what the game has set out for you, right? For instance, you can't decide not to kill the gods and role play as Kratos who wants to suddenly change his mind and work with the gods, right? That is an action linear story game. Extremely different from, let's say Skyrim, where, obviously Skyrim is a little bit of a different choice for this, but you can choose to align with a certain side in the Civil War and, change a bit of an outcome of the Civil War and how the factions and stuff rest. And stuff like that is really what an RPG is. Having a different outcome on the narrative and being able to make meaningful decisions is what an RPG really at the deepest core should be. Like I said, you should be playing a role, the role of the Dragonborn who decides, how he's going to change history by siding with someone in the Civil War or deciding to help out the Thieves Guild, right? These are all different roles that you can play. You can play the role of a member joining the Thieves Guild. And yes, you are the Dragonborn, which does, kind of add a little bit of meh to it. Maybe if we go back to Oblivion where it's a little bit different, where you're just some regular dude who just comes in and you're John Oblivion. You show up to the Thieves Guild, you do your job. And next thing you know, you're big shit around the Thieves Guild because you worked your way through the ranks. It's not like, you're big Dragonborn guy, you do 2 missions, and next thing you know, you own the Thieves Guild, It's a little bit silly in the bit of a Skyrim aspect, so I think Oblivion can kind of fit the role a bit better. Now, when we say stuff like acting out a role instead of because most games, like we said earlier, most games are similar to acting. There is elements where this does get a little confusing, and why I think The Witcher is on this spectrum list again is because similar to Fallout and similar to Skyrim and even maybe Cyberpunk a little bit, you're playing a certain character, and I think in Dragon Age Inquisition you're playing the Inquisitor, but I could be wrong about that. I haven't played Inquisition quite just yet. And the Courier and Fallout, etc. But, and Shepard and Mass Effect. Now, granted, these are a little bit of an exception because, yes, while you are playing this distinct character, you have massive, massive outcomes on the narrative and the way the story goes. So it is quite different from something like God of War where you're just acting as Kratos, because in The Witcher, you are Geralt. There's a difference. You're not acting as Geralt. You are Geralt. You are changing the way the Baron questline ends, You have massive things you can do to change the outcome. It's so different. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused on with RPGs, and where at least your traditional kind of examples of RPGs and how it's very different compared to certain games. And like I said, it's super different because all these games, and even in Mass Effect, I mean, from what I know, I've never played Mass Effect, but I know that your choices, to my knowledge, carry on throughout the game series. From what I know, and I think Dragon Age also has this as well. I know like early BioWare kind of was like the king of stuff like that, when it came to RPGs, etc. Not that they've, fallen off a little bit. But yeah, these single player story games have massive differences on what you can do with the narrative, and you are playing the role of Geralt the Witcher. You are not playing as Geralt. You are playing, it's quite different. I hope I'm explaining it relatively well. But yes, you are changing how the outcome is. It's very different from you just living the story, watching the movie, playing the script. That is more the stark difference between God of War, where you are Kratos playing throughout his story, and then being Geralt and choosing the story. Everything should be different pretty much every run. I feel like that's kind of where the RPG can stand out, where it's so drastically different each time based on your narrative choices. That is what can make key drastic differences. Imagine a skit, right? Imagine you're doing a skit and you're in theater class, and if I get this wrong, I never took theater class, so I could be entirely wrong about this, so I do apologize in advance. But imagine you're doing a skit and the teacher tells you, okay, John Thief, you're gonna go up to the king and you're gonna steal from John King, right? That is you playing out the skit. That is a skit, right? You've been told to do this skit and act out the skit, and similar to, Horizon, which is also on this list. You're doing the story. You've been told what to do. You have a mission, or you're not given multiple choices on how to do it. You're told what to do, exactly how to do it. And that is the stark difference between something where if you're role playing, let's say you're playing the role of a knight and the princess has been captured and you have to go storm the castle and go figure out how to save the princess. Now, key word is you're role playing, right? So you have to figure out how to save the princess in this castle. It's not, okay, you're going to go to the castle, go to this window, sneak in, do this, bam, 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 right? It's go save the princess from the castle. You are the knight. Now, how are you going to fulfill that role? Are you gonna, are you gonna climb the side similar to how maybe a thief would? Maybe you're a mage. Maybe you storm it with fireballs. Maybe you're a knight. Maybe you go into the front door and you bash on the door and you say, "Here, I'm here to take the princess back," right? And you fight them all. But you have that role. You are the savior going to save such and such from this castle, and that's the drastic difference. Now, I think a lot of games today get kind of blurred with the theme of RPG and the genre of RPG. Now, I think this happens because many games and gamers have kind of lost what the meaning of RPG is, right? I feel like we kind of see like stat numbers, multiple choices, character creation, class creation, silly little things like even if if you're doing an upgrade system, I feel like these are all things that just does not define an RPG. These are not what an RPG is down to the deepest core. And similar games like, God of War and even Breath of the Wild, which also kind of get, at least the newer God of War games, they kind of get lumped in as RPGs. Now, I think these are traditional action games or story games, and I think lots of these story games and action games, etc., have just included RPG elements. Now, there's a drastic difference. I think, like I said, Breath of the Wild having weapon upgrading and stat numbers, and these are RPG elements, but I wouldn't say that these are an RPG game. Similar with God of War, you upgrade Kratos, you unlock new skills, new abilities. I think these are RPG elements in our regular action story game. Super, super different from the, RPG title. I think doing that is just dishonest. Just calling it an RPG is dishonest. I know I'm mainly using God of War and Breath of the Wild because, God of War is on this list. I think Breath of the Wild gets categorized as an RPG quite often, which I think is just not the case. And I also want to clarify, it's totally fine to call a game an RPG if you want. There's no definitive answer for what something is at all. And it's really up to you, the player. I feel like my main goal of this video is because what is an RPG deep down to its core has really been kind of messed with and distorted, and I just feel like the true definition of an RPG has gotten lost throughout the years, which is totally fine. I just think that things have gotten a little blended. I think everything's an RPG. I mean, it is one of probably the most popular genres in gaming, especially throughout the years. We have MMORPGs as well, if I didn't include that earlier. There's just so many kinds of RPGs, and RPGs are a great genre. It's super, super fun to immerse yourself into the role of a character and become that character and live that story, and feel like your choices matter. That's really, what an RPG should be. Hey everyone, Future Wet Paint here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I, kind of showed you what some RPGs are, kind of helped clear the definition. If not, tell me what I did wrong in the comments. I also stream on twitch.tv at twitch.tv/wetpaint if you would like to come hop in. I really appreciate you all for watching the video, and I will be seeing you in the next one. Bye, everybody.